architects that on doing their own architecture, they develop a process that is comparable to a thesis. You show a leaf scheme, for example. So I think it's quite close to their experience of making a project that can become a scientific thesis. If you
I see.
And also, I would like to explore the idea of the artistic value of the thesis, the quality, because you measure in terms of artistic mastery. I think for architecture it's very important. We are more artists than technicians. We are more, even if our school is connected more with humanities or under the umbrella of social science faculty, in many institutions, architecture is more connected with arts, no? And I would like you to explore this artistic side of architecture. I think it would be also helpful for them.
You see, I'm born into a culture of continuities rather than distinct, separate pieces of mind. So actually, I see doing a thesis, or doing this or that, or studying something, all as part of one thing. And I think one reaches a state of consciousness as a result of everyday steps, that one becomes this other person. The attitude is therefore embedded. Whether I am working in a school close to a school of art or a school of physics, wouldn't make a difference because I have physics in me and art in me. It's just that I am in a university fortunate to have exposure to all of those things. As a matter of fact, in my own undergraduate studies, I made sure that I actually practiced that by adding years to having to go to School of Architecture, by taking courses in physics, quantum mechanics kind of thing, and taking many courses in English literature and sculpture, because I said, I'm in a university. I am becoming, the word in French is a good one, for formation, education, formation. I am becoming who I will be, you see. So I didn't say, well, to go to the sculpture studio, I have to take a 15-minute walk there for never mind. You know? I think these barriers are things that we actually legitimize much more than they are by our own actions. So we are in a faculty of social science. So what? There's a very important department of biology in this university. Why don't I go and speak to them? And there are mathematicians, some high-ranking mathematicians, some poets. Nobody's stopping me from doing that. Only I am stopping myself from doing that. You know? So we see barriers where there are none, because we legitimize the barriers that are there only for administrative convenience. You see what I mean? It's a different mindset, I agree. But I would think it's better to break these, build up these barriers. You know? I wake up, I want to share some thoughts with some other people, I go to a church. I don't go ask, may I please enter? No. I go there and share those thoughts. The world is ours. How many of us actually engage in discussions with poets, and sculptors and scientists? You know, the limitation is so severe that sometimes we, architects, think we are the only creative people. Now, there's one group of people I don't volunteer to talk to, and that is lawyers. Because I'm afraid, not because I have anything against them, but I'm afraid that if I actually start to have a conversation with them, they'll send me a bill. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
I wonder if you could say a few words on So definition of conditions. How much of it is in a way inevitable? That the conditions, the definition of the library isn't in a way defined by the architects. It's defined by time and place. But to say propose a library with a particular thesis, how much do you attribute to time and place as opposed to this kind of intense investigation of the architect?
Excuse me, I'm going to ask a question. Everyone who's sitting towards the end, already, did you hear Patrick's question? I'm always sensitive to people in the back of the room because they somehow become distant from our conversation. Could you please quickly say it again? Often I'm talking in a classroom somewhere and after I've been talking for 5 minutes, a student says, could you say that again? Well, how can I say that again? But I'm asking Patrick to do just that.
Essy talked about the importance of definition. So my question is that how much of these definitions has to do with one's conception versus what's happening through time and place. In other words, the change in the character of the library can't really attribute to one particular architect, say, but it has to do with how the function of the library evolves over time. But then maybe comes along this architect had something maybe slightly more unique and then take advantage of that redefinition. So I was wondering if you could say a few words about that.
Yes, please. Kenny wants to give a very definite answer.
No. I just wanted to just the sort of question about thesis, and I think that a lot of students are, of course, right now formulating that. And along with what Patrick's asking, what are your thoughts about the quality of the thesis that can come from, in a way, the designer, the architect imposing their thoughts about what the situation is. I mean, obviously, I don't know if I'm reading what Patrick is asking, but from what you presented today, there's this process of working through the body of architecture to arrive at some position, or whether or not it's something that you had in mind beforehand. It seems that
you arrive.
Yes, you arrive, and I think that a lot of times we might have the thought of what I would call the sort of imposition. I have this thought about what I think a library should be, and so therefore I start my investigation from that point. Do you think that as an investigation it can begin that way, or
let's do it that way. I think manifestos are manifestos. But I think everybody should sleep in open air. Fine. But that's a manifesto. I haven't arrived at that belief. It just came to my mind. I think in many fields that have to do with people's lives, one has to arrive at a position that is duly presentable. Like I should be able to say, look, having looked at the evolution of libraries, I put it to you, clients, that actually the people using these libraries are looking for the following circumstances. And in a way, therefore, I present what I have done. Not just that it's in my mind, but it is the evidence of how conditions have changed. I have never come across any client who would not be receptive to that. Never. Not that I have been in constant practice, but I have had enough contact on projects. And when I have presented the evidence, the same way as, almost the same way as a doctor would say to me, Essy, you've been drinking too much. Stop it. or else you're not going to drink much more, much longer. You know, I don't say, well, that's your idea. You see what I'm saying? Let me give you an example. Earlier, I was involved in designing housing for students. This is because it has almost all the ingredients of client resistance. For the University of Manchester, they were going to build housing for up to 2,000 students in what they call the village. I got involved. The designs were all done and they were accepted. However, they were. For some reason, they asked me to take a second look at it. I did. And my studies somehow led me to this basic conclusion that it's cheaper to build roofs than walls. And so I designed these things that look like Toblerone chocolate bars. So you can imagine the concept. And you could accommodate the same number at lower cost. Now the universities are a bit rigid that way because they have board of governors, etc., like the council here. They had already accepted, and the office had already spent all their money. But when the partners saw this, they said, "Yes, what have you been doing? Why can't you be a bit more sensible? The office to run. Sorry about this." So we had unfortunately presented these Toblerone-like things to the university, and they liked it a lot. And the reasons were convincing. For example, when the fire inspectors were examining it, they asked us in the design meeting, what about fire escapes? So I said to them, well, you see these corridors lead to fire escapes at the two ends of each bar. However, you tell me, if you were in a room and the fire bell went up, what would you do? Would you go out of your room and down the corridor, which is properly designed, or would you open the mailbox window and slide down the roof? Yes. And you could do that safely. So every flat had its own fire escape. And there were many other things. We didn't need scaffolding to build this. Okay, the university loved it, they accepted it, they built it. This is many years ago, and those housing is the one that fills up every year ever since with lowest maintenance. And in fact, the buses stop there and they call the stop Toblerones. Now, if you were against everything, that the clients would bring to you. Number one, we have already had our meetings. Why are you calling for more? Number two, the office has spent all its money. Why are you asking for more? Yes. Number three, this is a bit unorthodox. We didn't want to build in a way attic rooms for everybody. And at the base, what happens? Many, but we did the necessary amount of study. And to the doctor, they said, I think we have informed you. Now you decide, of course you're the master. And I remember instances, not so dramatic, but many clients are there to be served well. I don't think anybody can remember a client who comes to an architect and said, could you please design a bathroom there? Anyway, they're not masochistic. Have you had clients like that? If you have, I'm sorry. You should look for new clients. What do you think about this? Have you ever been fortunate enough to have a client who wants a bad building?
I've encountered a number of bad clients that used to be worth more.
You see?
That's another story.
Yes. No, I think I generally, maybe it takes a bit of optimism. Generally, I find people are very positive. I think one can work with developers very constructively. The clients welcome good ideas. The people working with you are all really interested in getting the best work out, all of that. Yeah.
Maybe after Thomas, we open up the questions. I know all the
There are some points from our student colleagues.
Anna.
said the power of thesis was
That light is really something.
you said the power of the thesis was the poignancy of the proposition and focus of vision. But I find that usually in the conceptual stage and where you're talking about abstract visions and like very utopian, idealistic ideas, often when it comes at the beginning of projects, it's easy to have that kind of power, but then a lot of times when you start to like work on the practical issues of it, what would your advice be on to not lose that type of poignancy and power when you're starting to design? Because a lot of times when you're bogged down in the practical, like how thick a wall should be, like corridors and stuff, it's easy to kind of, it filters out sometimes.
That's wonderful. Wonderful, because actually the opportunity for poetry is exactly at those difficulties. So when we come against those what we are calling the difficulties, is where the real opportunity is to recapture the power. So really, I would say that is what the studios are for. You can go drill through them, study many variations, and keep going back to the other thing. Yes.
Melanie, I have to jump in because the answer to your question was in the next point, which was what's the measure of the quality of the result, right? The reach of the imagination and the artistic mastery of its execution. This is what Essy is addressing. And what's very interesting, you look at the work of many architects in Hong Kong, and you look at their, go to HKIA directory or websites, a number of people have quite interesting perspective drawings of the real building doesn't resemble. And the sign of a really good architect is that the building is better than the rendering. So it's that, I think, the commitment to design as an iterative process and not try to predict that result. We were talking about, Philippe, talking about beauty. Beauty is the word that we don't mention enough in architectural schools. It should be mentioned on a daily basis. But how do you define that beauty? So when Essy pointed out Gary between the masterwork and when it falls into mannerism, even among the great architects, they fall into that trap. Because as Oscar Wilde said, I find all ugly things are the result of someone who tried to make something beautiful. And then all beautiful things result from someone trying to make something useful. So really, if you can identify the critical issues, and I think that's the value of this thesis project, whether it's 1 year or half a year, that's another discussion Professor Gu and I can have later, is to develop that critical thinking and faithfulness to the process. I think a lot of students do start off with a thesis saying, how can I make it iconic? How can I make it unique? That's a bad starting point. It's really, what is that burning problem issue that you feel so strongly about that you want to respond to? How do you develop the critical thinking response to it? What's the architectural proposition, the expression of it? And you follow that faithfully. At the end of the day, that project will be complete. And if you stick to your guns and you see it through, then you don't lose the power at that initial stage. You carry it all the way through to the final result. But you've addressed exactly the crux. I mean, that is the key question. That's the key concern. How do you get a great idea but make it into a great result?
You know, I also find, I don't know what you think about this, see what you think. I also find that maybe at times what we see as difficulty is not with the idea, but with our maybe not very developed skills. You know, actually, because of a certain way we work, you know, I find in various situations that we have lost some of the skills, for example, on how to draw a line, that points to a solution. Because we take the line as a fait accompli. After all, there's no difference between it and the line that the computer can draw for me. You see? But when I draw the line, not me, but when the hand draws the line, that line is an act of searching, discovering. When the computer does it, it's a mindless act of carrying out an instruction. And I find that some of that is perhaps beginning to be compromised. You know? It would be interesting. I hope to be here enough to see actually how you work, you know, on the board. Like you say, I have this idea, but it doesn't seem to be coming. To actually look to see, let's see what you did that you say I worked. You know, it's very important that, I think. Have you experienced that difficulty, or do you see what I'm saying?
I mean, for me personally, it's exactly what you said. It's a difficulty that actually if you get through it, what
Just,
makes the...
you know, just a way of working, frankly, just a way of, I mean, the craft of doing, the designing has a lot to do with just the doing of it, you know. Like, I have some experience of seeing that some of us actually are not terribly sure how even to draw a plan. I mean, we're talking within amongst friends, you know. So this is not supposed to be judgmental. But really, we need to be confident and take pleasure in an artful drawing of a plan. If I cannot do that, how can I actually design? You know? You know, if you tell me to draw the plan of the Roby house, can I do it? And do I know how to draw it so that I'm capturing the essence of it? And if I cannot do it, why do I expect myself to have the skill to go beyond the Roby house? These things matter. These are actually almost physical prerequisites of designing. Yeah. In many, many places, by the way, one finds this difficulty now of lack of loss. No, I should say loss of skills, body skills. You know, one good thing about sports, which I envy all the time, is that when a gymnast says, I'm on the parallel bars, he cannot say, and the computer is going to do it, it will show you. You, on the parallel bars, and if you cannot do it, out. This physicality of what we do is very important, I think, in design. You know, not everything is cerebral. But a lot of the time, again, we should be careful, I think, not to think that just doing things means we are discovering. Like I know that we do very big drawings and very big models, but we've already made all the decisions. So the act of making that model is not an act of discovery, you know? It's just executing instructions. Otherwise, by the way, I think our models wouldn't be so finished looking. You know? There would be some parts of it that are almost like a sketch. You know, look at some sculptures as an example by Rodin. You see major pieces of a work of sculpture, just a rough cut through a piece of stone, and some pieces very well worked out. You know, in a way, designs, the way I imagine it, in a thesis, should come out with that sort of quality, you know? There are many, many examples. Look at some drawings of Michelangelo. You see a beautifully drawn hand that goes into a sketched arm, you know? Not all of it, you know what I mean? You should try it. Yeah.
Thomas has
Sorry. I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I think we're talking about it's about the question of the process, right? Design process, the way of working,
Yes.
and then we're saying there's kind of loss. Is there any way to either learn or teach this kind of thing, or in terms of case